do our intro. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Cepin, and across from me is Andy Littleton from Mission Church, and I'm the pastor of Village Church in Tucson, Arizona. And we had a special guest.
Oh, yeah.
My dad, John Cepin.
That's right.
The one and only. Well, not really. There's a lot of John Cepins back east, but anyway, there was.
The one and only that's your dad.
Yes, the one and only dad. Anyway, and he talked, and we listened.
Yep. Good to hear his
really
story.
Good.
John, for those of you who don't know, 30-some years in biblical counseling here in Tucson, told us his story, some big takeaways from those years. So you'll wanna tune in and see what he has to say.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, good to be here.
So an intro will have been done by now, John. We have with us a first-timer on any podcast, but not a first-timer to the microphone. Not a first-timer to the microphone. John Cepin, father of our own Eric Cepin, right here.
I am your father. Mm-hmm.
And Eric, explain. This is a surprise to me.
Yeah.
And as it might be to everyone, I didn't know we were doing this. So
Eric was supposed to call you.
Well, he knew yesterday.
There was a text yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's not totally surprised.
Not totally surprised. But Eric, this is some form of calling of the bluff, I hear.
Well, my dad made a comment of, you guys drive me nuts. So I said, well, why don't you come be on the podcast?
Okay. Was this this is the kid going, see if you could do it any better than me? Is that something like that?
No, my dad was being silly, and I thought, well,
I was being silly.
It would be fun to have him on the podcast.
Yeah, you're a silly guy, John. I mean, from the years of, you've corrected me, you've called me to repentance, but you're a silly
Have I?
guy. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, I've had to apologize to you. I've had to ask your forgiveness.
Well, that was
Well, we're getting serious here now.
Yeah, we're going to get real serious
that's-
about my anger issues and how I move toward power.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what though? That was sure, but the fact that you did apologize is one of the reasons I continue to. You're one of my favorite leaders in my life, honestly, because I've been many people have messed up and toward me, and very rarely do you hear any form of self-reflection. And so,
Yeah, good.
to me, that whole time, I don't view that as problematic at all. I view it as we moved through it, and you showed me how to apologize as a man. That was great.
Yeah, that was a while back,
But I was pushing earlier than that. I mean, back early in our early times, getting to know each other, you kind of dug in on me pretty good, and it was really helpful. I didn't like it in the moment, but it was really helpful. So, yeah. Anyway, but you're also a silly guy.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and he's got you frozen at 29, too. So that's
Why is that? I mean, I recall the Holy Trinity Monastery years and years ago. You went out to the San Pedro on one of the reflection times of writing your story, and you made a cross out of barbed wire. You still have that?
I do.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. It's at the church, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, I do. That's right. And so how old was I then? Was I 25? I was probably 25. So,
Has it been that long?
yeah, 13 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So for context, for those listening to us, this is good. This is a good little reflection, little catch up. But John and Patty, Eric's parents, long ministry of biblical counseling, spiritual direction, soul care. And Eric grew up, and this is the home of Eric. For me, this is something I experienced for the first time probably around age 25, through a church retreat, not your church, a church you helped you worked with the men's ministry to some degree, at the time. And
Excuse me.
And so I go on this retreat out at a monastery. That's when we met for the first time. And for me, I bumped into this. There were several things. There was a number of things going on for me. But one of the things you really keyed in on that ended up being, it felt tangential at the time, but it wasn't, was this disdain I had for wealthy people. and you really went at me in front of the group on that. And these are a bunch of wealthy guys at a big church, and no, it's great. You're cringing, but
No, I can't remember it, Andy. It's my
that's okay. That's okay. Well, that's why I'm saying it. So you went after me on that, and you brought it up in front of all them, but then you also you caught me later, and you said, what is the something, this is a big issue for you. And that and it really that started opening up other things for me. So anyway, you're a big part of my life. So.
Well, I'm very honored to be a part of your life and seeing you planting a church in an area that's really it's definitely midtown. Well, you had Midtown Church, but Mission Church is there's a mission field there. It's I mean, everything around you.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's a unique area. So anyway, thank you for that. That's who, and that's the relational connection here.
Yeah,
Dad,
it is.
Counselor, spiritual director. Yeah. What was okay? How many years did you spend in this field? Tell us how you got there. I mean, we know you're Eric's dad, but how did you get to doing? Give us just a little timeline.
Well, you're speaking specifically to be doing. Well, it began in Miami, Arizona, when I was the assistant principal at Miami High School. School of about 700 back then. I was hired there to straighten out the attendance issues. There were like 15 to 20% absenteeism, which is you got to keep it down under 5, and then discipline was out of sight. But
you were a school administrator.
I was a school administrator.
Okay.
No, I was a teacher.
A teacher.
Teacher at Palo Verde High School here in Tucson for. Let's just say during the 70s, I taught mathematics and I coached varsity swimming there.
For those of you who don't know where Miami is, if you took kind of the roundabout or back way toward Phoenix, or if you were going to go to the White Mountains,
Roosevelt Lake.
Yeah, you might go up Oracle Road instead of taking Interstate 10,
Correct,
and you would get up to Globe
Yeah.
and Miami, which are kind of sister towns right there.
Right, 5 miles apart, big rivals in football, lots of anxiety when it was a home game.
Okay.
People don't remember. We honestly had like probably 16 sheriff. They were volunteer guys, and we had the walkie-talkie type things, and it was a pretty raucous crowd. But anyway, with all that being said, what happened during that time was we ended up having a home church in our home and began to run into problems of, a daughter jumping out the back window to have sex with her boyfriend, and people coming to us and going, what do we do? And other things that Patty was running into. And really, for the first time, believe it or not, even though I grew up I grew up as a Catholic. There was definitely a sense of Jesus in my life, and it's a long story about all that, but basically to hear about sexual abuse was like, what? And Patty ran into that, and in fact, we ended up having to get police involved at one point. It was very, very difficult, and in dealing with people they would come to the church on a Sunday at our home, and people wouldn't leave till like 5:30, 6 o'clock at night.
Wow. Yeah.
But we found that, what do we do with people? And then I was running into problems as an assistant principal.
Okay.
With families that came in, a lot of Hispanic families. Half the school was Hispanic, the other half, obviously Caucasian. But there was a Mormon influence there. Yeah. There was a cowboy influence, the Mexicans and the cowboys fighting. And but sitting in my office with a family with their son or daughter in trouble, and I'm going like, what do I do as a believer in Jesus? So I began to pray, and Patty and I talked, but I thought I'm going to go to seminary, and that's going to help.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
But I'm not going to go to a seminary east of the Mississippi, that's for sure. I didn't want to do that. I love the West, even though I was born in Youngstown, Ohio. So looked at Dallas, looked at a really serious look at Regent in Canada, and was really moving in some of those directions. And then one of Patty's disciplers told her about Larry Crabb, and he was doing a 1 week long, his IBC. Yeah, that's back in what I call early Crabb, and it was in
What's IBC?
It's Institute of Biblical Counseling. That was one of his first, let's just say, organizations.
Yeah, they do.
You just launched it or something.
Yeah, they do week-long trainings, basically.
It's like a fire hose. I mean, it makes Potter's Wheel look like, just dribbling out of a fire. We went to that, and while I was there, I was so moved by what was going on. It was all way too much. I talked to Larry Crabb personally, and I said, you know what, can I talk to you about coming to your first class? Because he hadn't started. He moved from Boca Raton, Florida, up to Grace Theological Seminary, definitely east of the Mississippi, in Winona Lake, Indiana, not far from Fort Wayne. And he interviewed me, got back to me, and said, look, there's no way you can get into the first class, but hey, apply for the second.
Yeah.
So after 4 years in Miami, Arizona, I applied and got accepted. And in June of 1983, we drove out in the U-Haul, if you remember, Eric.
Yeah.
How old is Eric at this time?
Oh, I would be going into the 6th grade, so 12.
Okay. Yeah.
What was that like? What was that like for you driving out of there?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't.
So the issue was in my life with the different things I get wrapped around. I was pursuing a PhD at the University of Arizona, and honestly, there was a point where I thought I'm driving out. I could just drive in Tucson, reconnect with my advisor, and finish my PhD, or I can go on to seminary. It occurred to me, but it did. But we pressed into going to seminary. Without going into details about seminary, went through, and Patty went through the program, pretty much most of it, but just with 3 kids, and they allowed her to take regular classes, even though she did not have a degree. They allowed her to do that, and they could be transferred as undergrad work. But so that, and then we left there, and the goal was to come back to Tucson and just be a teacher.
Okay.
And or administrator.
And just be equipped with this.
Yeah, equipped and be in a
counseling.
church and to help a church develop some, lay counselors, stuff like that. And I put out 25, 30 applications and nothing happened. And there was a little church in Fayetteville, North Carolina, as I say. It's a Bible. It's like Bible Chapel. It's part of the Plymouth Brethren movement. Mm-hmm. And they offered me a full-time, they called it a full-time workers position.
Yeah.
And I was there for about 10 months.
Okay.
We stayed there a year and a half, but that situation did not go well. In a lot of different ways. But I also had a private practice going at the same time. So I began to get into private work. And then when we ended up coming back to Tucson in 86, I came back in January of 86 and began teaching as a teacher out at Santa Cruz Valley Union High School, or it was Eloy High School. Yeah. Kind of rough in those days. Today it's not like it was. But anyway, I still continued to apply for teaching positions, and it just didn't work out. In fact, one job where Eric was going to go to school at Rincon, I was down to the final 2 for a university high school position, and I thought, I know the head of the department, I'm in.
Yeah.
Well,
nope.
It got down to the last 2, and it was real close, and he called me on a Sunday night and said, I'm sorry, John. And so at that point, I got on my knees at Patty and I prayed, but I remember getting on my knees at El Dorado Plaza and just saying, Lord, I'm going to dedicate my whatever private work there is to you. And that's when it started. Basically summer of 86. And then I just was full time in hearing and seeing things in people's lives that I've never thought I'd ever hear again. And not always good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I spent 5 years in inpatient work.
Yeah.
Along with still doing a practice. And so did training when I came back, and then I don't know where you want to go from there, but that's how I got started in it. It was.
And then how many years were you here?
Well, I still
in that practice here in Tucson.
Oh, in Tucson from '86 until now. Am I good?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I'm gonna lift your mic.
Yeah, '86 until now. Although I did a year and a half, or not quite a year and a half in Fayetteville, but yeah, '86 until now. I still do some. I don't do anything like a full-time practice. I do some mentoring work with a few pastors that I meet with.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I don't even know if I'd call it. It's mentoring, soul care, just encouragement.
Yeah.
But during COVID, I still do some of that, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah.
Probably 34, 5, whatever.
Mm-hmm. What are two biggest, or you can give us more than that, but let's just shoot for two. Two biggest takeaways.
He's gone interviewer today. That's awesome. Go for it.
Yeah. That if you could just impress this out onto people of our churches or some pastor, we have some pastor friends who tune in every once in a while. Two things you're like, from my years of experience, please pay attention to these two things or look out for these two things.
Talk about pastors or people?
Pastors. Let's start with pastors first.
Okay, we'll start with pastors.
I would say
then people.
I would say one of the things is a vital devotional life.
Yeah.
So
you're saying pastors should nurture a vital devotion.
Pastors should should say that for me, Eric. Should nurture. Yes, yeah, that's it. That's right. That's one thing for sure. The other thing is to find someone that you can be brutally honest with. Now, that should be with our spouses, okay? And so I'll say that what I've learned in my life, which it's been a hard lesson for me, it's been in marriage, two things: being brutally honest with one another about our relationship. And in fact, we had that discussion last night. Patty and I had a good time of prayer. Just being honest about my weakness and not leading and pushing into. We hear our wives say, I'm not doing well, and we go, yeah, well, hey, good. When's dinner? Rather than pushing into those kind of things, but brutal honesty and then a willingness to forgive.
Yeah,
those are important. But from a pastor standpoint, I wonder, having been there briefly for 10 months, what am I going to talk about this week? And I wasn't really nurturing my walk with God in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And so I'd see myself at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning sitting in my office thinking, what am I going to talk about at 10 this morning? Mm-hmm. I've been working on it all week, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So
I think having the vital relationship with God, with Jesus, the Holy Spirit, with, God sees us. He El Roy, Yahweh El Roy. I mean, God, the God who sees, he sees us, and he desires that we respond to that. And I think having a relationship that's vital. I mean, there's a connection. There's a relational connection with God. And I remember Bill Wormsley long ago, a man who he gave to Tucson. It was probably one of the finest teachers we've had here. He often talked about a friend of his, John Castile, and he said, I just wish I had a relationship with God like John Castile has. Huh. And he mentioned it, and he used the category of a devotional life. And I know that's an old term, but I would say, I don't know if I can give a number two other than the number two is to have someone in your life who can hold your feet to the fire. And if I might say, this happened with me as I was praying. Actually, at the end of the year, like, Lord, what do you have? I'm the COVID thing. I feel like directionless. What do you have for me? What are these last years? I'm 78. I mean, look at the actuarial tables. And And so there was a pastor that called me, and he just wanted to grab breakfast, and I thought, oh, okay, man, And we get through the whole breakfast as usually happens, and he's, oh, by the way, the reason I want to meet with you is I feel like I need to talk to someone, and I was encouraged to do this, and would you want to spend some time? And I thought, absolutely. And he goes, well, really? I said, yeah. I prayed that basically a couple days ago, and I feel like this is an answer to prayer. So it's a challenge. So I think having that, it's not like he's trying to hide or others, but I think pastors need that.
Yeah.
Those are a couple of things that come to mind.
That's good. I've been really blown away in the last couple of years because I've gotten into this denominational world and I've sat around with a lot more pastors. Just gave me the sign of the cross. But I'll tell you, every time I've described, I'm a part of this thing. It's just become known as Wednesday breakfast with our friend Rod and my co-pastor Nick. And then we've got another guy who's a young potential pastor in Northwest, and then John, who's our kind of, pastor in training at our church. And we'll go after each other on things. We can come with our idea, and sometimes we just laugh our heads off about silly. I mean, sometimes it's just a big joke. But every week, 3+ hours we do this.
Wow.
And I've realized when I tell people that, the pastors sitting around they want that so bad. The jealousy factor that comes into play from other pastors is huge. They just wish they had somebody older and somebody about their age and their stage that they could just actually talk about any of it with, including none of it. If the week means, we just need to really have some laughs this week. And I've just realized how rare it really is to have a space where you can do that. And so what you're saying really resonates, I think, especially when there's a degree of willingness to enter in to difficult things. That's even bigger. What about just the church folk listening? As so many years of biblical counseling, same things. Anything else?
Well, it's unfortunate that I can go on, and I don't want to take all the time in doing that. But
that's why you're here, man.
When you sit down,
we're recording your wisdom. Let's go for it.
Okay,
so just go for it.
I have a great deal of difficulty with where we are today. Mm-hmm. There's a great deal of there's an emphasis on the professional, an emphasis on degrees, and I have a lot of degrees, but I would be like Paul. I'd throw them all away for just being able to connect with Jesus at a deep level.
Yeah.
However, that being said, which is the common phrases you hear today, someone comes and sits with you as a pastor, or me as a professional when I was doing that professionally, and even now trying to mentor people, and you sit with someone and it's a problem. It's my wife is, she's thinking of leaving me, or my daughter is having problems, or my son is having difficulties and he's been thrown out of school, or I've lost my job and I'm having trouble dealing with a pornography habit. And so a lot of professionals even, there's never a check. The assumption here is we're going to have people sitting in front of us who profess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. You know what I've learned in 35 years? And I didn't do this in the beginning. I mean, there were ways. Let's get into your heart. Let's get into let's look at the victimization. Let's look at where you've been sinned against. But then let's also move in a direction of, because of that, how you've sinned against others. And so there does need to be repentance here, even for those who have been sexually abused.
Right.
Dan Allender makes a very good point in his book, The Wounded Heart, edition number 1. 2 is a different story, but I mean, it's still good. It's just more the neuroscience stuff. But that's really, and in fact, that's the gold standard book in our Christian circles. But finding out where someone is with Jesus.
Right.
And when I began to do that, I would hear things like, "Oh, I don't spend time with God. I don't read my Bible. I don't pray. How are we going to move someone to trust in someone who they don't even know?" And I'm telling you, that's startling. And so where do you go with that?
Yeah.
You do hear, you do listen, you do pray, but you begin to encourage someone in that particular discipline. And I find that, again, early on, I was there myself as a young father. I mean, I was running hard and fast.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't, Palo Verde High School. I mean, I was teaching an overload and coaching 2 varsity sports and in grad school.
Yeah.
Did I have time for Jesus? Absolutely not. Did it impact my marriage? Absolutely. Did it impact how I parented my children? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I needed someone in my life to just go, "You're crazy. You need to slow down."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there needs to be a spiritual assessment, and I do not see that happening in what I would call a professional world. And I'll say this, even within Tucson, I can't, but I was there. So I'm just saying I don't hear it. I hear, well, yeah, he does good cognitive behavioral work, or yeah, that's where he's going to go with this. And it's not a question of, how are you doing with Jesus? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it seems like the fully orbed discipleship of where it's like, this is, yeah, we're going to talk about your problem and what you're facing, but we're going to talk about your walk with Jesus.
Absolutely,
Right.
Andy. Yeah. And I find that, and I'm going to say this, and this is a hard thing for me to say, Potter's Wheel, 5-day training, I don't know if you haven't gone through that.
I've done a number of LLMs, no Potter's Wheels.
So I should just insert here that we're throwing around words like Potter's Wheel, which is my dad's
More, okay.
and my mother's week-long mentoring, spiritual direction, soul care training kind of
It's
thing.
training. It's basically the essence will be said Matthew 7:4. Get the log out of your own eye before you can. You need to discern the speck in your brother's eye, and I think that's part of the Potter's Wheel. And the other part is learning and seeing how you enter, but it's mostly taking a good inside look yourself. But then learning some things about how to
ask good questions.
Yeah,
listen.
how to be a part of someone else's life. Yeah. So now I'm totally lost. You got
Well,
me.
so we're defining term learning to love the masters. The LLM stands for learning to love the master, and that is kind of a time where you get away with a group,
Right.
And you enter into silence with God and begin to ask about God's involvement in your story.
Right, and it's writing your God story. Yeah. So what I was going to say is sometimes people coming into a Potter's Wheel training, they need to be people who already have a desire to help others. If they don't, the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
What we've seen happen, and it's been really hard to accept, we did it, and people came in and they did not have a vital walk with God.
Yeah.
And so we're handing AK-47s to boy soldiers or girl soldiers. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And it has backfired some.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say. So I went into more of, because Patty developed a 5-day thing. I went on and on for 2 years. What I did things that were seminary level stuff with people. And that was good, but at the same time, really assessing someone's walk with God. Oh my gosh, how did I miss all that? But
So what you're saying then?
I'm telling you right now. I mean, it's I think a spiritual assessment in every church. Like just honestly, where are you? Don't tell me that. Oh yeah, well I do read my. When you ask people, I pray as I walk, or I pray when I'm in my car. No. Do you have a time where you're totally alone, and it's the early hours of the morning, and Jesus, you're hearing His voice say, He said to me the other day, you need to get on your knees before your wife. You need to lay hands on her knee that's killing her, and you need to pray for her. And I didn't do that for about 2 or 3 days. And finally the other day I said, Lord, what is this with me? That's a whole other issue. We could spend time on that. But I did the other day, and she said to me, she says, boy, that was so precious to me. And I thought, where are you going to hear God? In the noise of the world. We have a noisy world.
Yeah, increasingly so.
Yeah, I'm getting wound up.
So I mean, I think to summarize what you're saying is that if you're speaking to people, I think you're speaking to pastors too, that there is this need to create space and have a discipline in the engagement of your relationship with God. There has to be some intentional nurturing and knowing of God as we.
That's well said, Eric. I appreciate those words. Very well said.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, but that's what you're saying in a more, emphatic way, I think.
It can't just occur, like you can't just rely on, well, while I'm driving to work, I think I'll think about God sometimes and that'll do. Right. It's got to be more.
And everything, there's competition, as we know, for all of that. Even this morning, I was thinking, I got up and I was tired, didn't feel good. I mean, I was thinking, I want to be with these guys, but you know what? I can't remember now. Help me, guys. John 5:3, the Word of God washing over us. And I thought, I need to have a bath this morning. I mean, we may talk about some things that are fun, and we may talk about things that are serious. I want to have your Word wash over me this morning.
Yeah.
And so I did. It wasn't lengthy, but it was about 30 minutes. But it was time for me to reflect and to let God's Word wash over me and read the story of Joseph and his brothers and think about that. And
we're reading that in the evenings as a family right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
Anyway, so there we go.
Yeah. It's something that's been brought up a million times, I'm sure, but we always plan for that which we love the most. I mean, if the big football game is coming on, you clear the decks so you can watch it. That's a plan, right? And so that intentionality, I mean, our love for God is probably seen in our planning of time to be with him. And when it's waning, we can see that in our lack of intentionality and moving toward him. That, not to put a guilt trip on folks, but just that'd be a way of assessing. Do I block out time to be with God? Right.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of guilt trip. I think that's good for us to hear. It's good for us to. The thing that Eric has, and I'm sure Hebrews 10:24 and 25, and let us deeply meditate upon how we can encourage one another to love and good works.
Right.
I remember a time at the village here when you said, I want everyone to think about someone and meditate on meditate on where they are, moving toward them and encouraging them to love and good works. I mean, I'm telling you, my experience, pastors are some of the loneliest people in the world.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
When I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina, I had one friend.
Yeah.
PCA pastor.
Yep.
I know, we're on a podcast. Am I going to push PCA? I reconnected with him.
Yeah.
That was 1985 when I called him and said, the church has asked me to leave.
Yeah.
So I said, Randy, his name was Randy Wilding. He's in Florida now. I did contact him recently. I said, Randy, thank you for what you did on that day. You drove over, way younger than me.
Yeah.
He said, let's get on our knees and pray. He got up, he looked me in the eye and said, if you don't leave, the church will split. I think I'm hearing from God, you need to leave. Wow. It was the hardest thing I've ever heard, but there was a man who was with me. But when I say lonely, he's the one man I could call. And I had one guy. That's it. Does that sound bad? I mean, yes.
Yeah. Well, this is the exact thing I'm talking about. That jealousy I've heard from other pastors about this little breakfast gathering is because they don't have friends, right? It's hard because the people in your church are the people who are close in your community. I think, Eric, you experienced this at the village, maybe even more than most of us, more than me. The village is very, very close. I think you might, and you'd have to speak to this, find more friendship in your church than most pastors do.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But to most pastors, the church people are not your friends. They are your biggest critics. You are afraid of them, or they exhaust you, or they think you're unapproachable, or there's a whole laundry list of reasons. But a lot of the pastors I know, the people of their church are definitely not their friends. I think I have more of an experience of that. I think at the Village it's very deep. You guys have been at it for a long time. I think I have more of an experience of that than some pastors, but a lot of them I know, I don't think they taste of that at all. So then, do they outside of that have these vital friendships?
Right.
Seems pretty rare because all their time and energy is going.
Well, and I think that would be a credit to Rod. I think what you experience at with Rod at breakfast. I mean, Rod and I, for the first, I'd say 15 years of the Village, we would go sit in my back shed.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have an office. That was a shed. And we would talk for maybe 3 hours and pray for 2. So like we did this 5-hour time where I can remember times of praying.
Man, that's rare.
We did that every
so
single week. And we had one privilege over like a 4-month period. My wife sat in for about the first 2 hours and she typed them out, this conversation. So I have like 40 pages of just conversation.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
why don't I know those things?
Yeah, but we would sit and pray, and like
that's another topic.
So Rod really, that is a lot of his, DNA in that, and so that actually created a lot of the way the leaders interact in our community.
Yeah.
So sometimes it frustrates the administrator in me because relationship and prayer are a big part of who we are. Then we get to the end of meetings, and I'm like, we didn't decide anything, but the Holy Spirit said a bunch of stuff. But how are we got to figure out how to do this? Who's doing what?
Well, that's the incredible backwards thing. I mean, so in that little Wednesday breakfast discussion right now, I'll tell you. I mean, there are talks of a church plant there and getting like good synergy around that. There have been a lot of ideas that have been kiboshed. There have been some ideas that have been like, gas pouring on the fire. It's been a very productive time. That's outside of even the fact that all of us love to be. How many meetings do you get invited to that are potentially 3 to 4 hours long that you go, I'd like to go to that? I mean, we are sad if Rod's like, guys, I can't. We've done it anyway. We're just like, okay, we're even though he's not here, we're gonna do this. People have wanted into it, and we've let them, and then said, no, actually, too many people kind of messes this up. Like, people want into this really, really long, quote unquote meeting. Why, right? And it's over the years, there have been so many of them where nothing was accomplished. But when you look at the aggregate of it all, so much happens, so much, because there's hearing from God. There's just deepening of relationship. And out of that comes good works, right? But you don't get it quick, and you don't always see the discernible takeaway. And I think that just rails against the professional in us, right? Where let's have an efficient meeting, get in, get out, what was accomplished. And I get it. I have those too, right? But we need something that's not that. And what you're saying is that was embedded in your church.
It has been embedded in my church. It is the way people operate.
Yeah. Yep. I like that.
Yeah, to just go in and pray. I was talking to a pastor about, you do the meetings and you come away empty.
Yeah.
Even the larger churches that have big staffs, that it's even sometimes more lonely.
Oh, yeah. I would venture, again, to say the pastors I know in the bigger churches, the loneliest, I think. Yeah. Yeah,
there's that issue. And like, where is there? I mean, I was the guy running fast and hard, definitely influenced by the Navigators early on and discipled by them, and probably for the briefest time in Nav history, Patty and I were on staff for a very, very short time, and that's another story. But Yes, I memorized scripture, I witnessed to people, but did I have a vital relationship with Jesus? One man taught me that when I was teaching at Palo Verde High School. He's passed on now. Roger Fleming was the NAV rep here for years, and he would show up. I think it was weekly, and I would meet in my geometry room at Palo Verde High School really early, like 6:30 or even earlier possibly. I had keys to the school and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I could get in because I coached sports. But Roger would say, hey, let's just, hey, good to see you. How you doing? Good. He said, let's just pray. That's all we did. All we did was pray. And it was a hard time in my life at that point. And I learned a little bit of what it was like to connect with God in prayer through him. And I think we do a lot of talking, and I still err on that side, but
Sure.
Just to say, spend some time with someone, you can get to know people. And one of the things I'll say is, and if you don't do it, you probably need to, is if anyone's listening who's a pastor, when you meet with people, if it's a husband and wife, don't you just pray. You pray around. You have them pray, and that's part of, and even it's a spiritual time, but it's an assessment. And then after the session's over, everybody prays.
Yeah.
And it's quite revealing.
That's something I've picked up along the way, and the other people that have counseled me have all been influenced by you. So I'll bet you gave me that.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
I am Eric. You and Rod spending that kind of time in prayer, man.
Yeah, no, we.
I didn't know that.
First 10 years, 15 years of the church. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
and that's where we need to be today, right? We're so caught up in everything else in our world that we're really missing out on the fullness of the gospel. And so, anyway,
Well, that was good. Is that? I don't know what time it is.
I don't have my watch or my phone. I
think that was it. I think that was our conversation right there. So
I don't know what time it is. Oh, there it is. It's 9:21. Yeah, we are actually done because Mark will be here in 9 minutes.
all right. Well, thanks for tuning in, John. Thanks for being on, sharing some of your story. Good to see you.
yeah, good to see you, Andy. Really good to see you.
Yeah, Eric. Thanks for calling his bluff or whatever it was that brought him here.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I like this. I mean, we might need to add my dad to special quarterly time with John Cepin.
Why not? Why not?
And,
Back on the airwaves. So anyway, thanks for listening. You can always email us, faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. Take it easy though. Our inbox is getting a little slammed. I mean, but if it's really important, please do email us and look out for. We may have a website again in the not so distant future.
So like a big time. It looks like. Did you take a look at the stuff that Jake Barr sent us?
He didn't send me anything.
Okay, I'll forward it to you.
Yeah.
He sent the whole agreement. They're going to basically donate thousands of dollars of they're going to send us into the professional world when it comes to Faith Over Breakfast podcast.
There goes our relationship with God.
Yeah, it's just going to head on out. We got to
You just have to pray more because it's deeper trust.
Anyway, so thank you, Jake, for really taking
Jake,
us. And iRapture.com is the company that's taking us over.
Hopefully they don't disappear.
Yeah, hopefully not.